Today, I want to talk about something that most people don't even realize is happening. And it's the reason a lot of women feel stuck, overwhelmed, and disconnected from God. And that is control. But not in the way you might think. Because when we hear the word control, we usually think of something obvious, like trying to force things, or being overly rigid, or needing everything to go a certain way. But control can actually be very subtle. In fact, most of the time, it doesn't look like control at all. It looks like being responsible. It looks like thinking things through, or trying to make the right decision, wanting clarity before you move. And on the surface, none of those things seem wrong. But when you look a little bit deeper, you start to realize that a lot of it is rooted in needing to feel in control. And this is where it starts to affect your relationship with God. Because when you are operating from control, you're not actually letting God lead. You're trying to manage everything yourself. You're trying to figure it out, plan it out, think it through, make sure it makes sense before you take a step. And what that creates is constant overthinking. It creates hesitation. It creates this feeling of being stuck, even when you want to move forward. And then you start to think, why can't I hear God clearly? Why do I feel so disconnected? Why does nothing feel certain? And it's easy to assume that God just isn't speaking. But a lot of the time, it's not that God isn't speaking, but that the control is louder. Because control wants everything to feel safe. It wants everything to make sense. It wants guarantees that things are going to work out before you do it, or that there's a plan and the plan is going to be executed well and nothing's going to go wrong. But guess what? That is not how God leads. God doesn't always give you the full picture. In fact, He mostly just gives you direction, and then He asks you to trust Him with the rest. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because if you're used to being in control, that kind of trust can feel unfamiliar. It can feel like you're stepping into something without having all the answers, which you are. And that's why so many women stay in this cycle. They keep asking God for clarity, but they don't move until they feel comfortable, completely certain in the scenario. And so it just keeps them stuck, you stuck, because clarity doesn't always come before movement. And a lot of the time it comes after. And that's the shift. When you start to let go of control, you don't instantly feel like everything is figured out. But you start to feel something different. You start to feel peace. You start to feel less pressure to have all the answers. You start to move with a different kind of confidence. Not because you are certain, but because you're actually trusting, and you realize you don't have to be the one that actually leads this thing. And that's what changes everything. So, if you've been feeling stuck, or like you can't hear God clearly, or like you're constantly overthinking your next step, I want you to ask yourself this. Where am I still trying to be in control? Because awareness is the first step. And once you start to see it, you can begin to shift it. And if this is something you've been walking through, I created a free guide that breaks this down for you in a really simple way. It walks you through what might be blocking you and how to start hearing God more clearly in your everyday life. I'll leave it below. And just know, you don't have to figure everything out on your own. You were never meant to carry it that way. You're just learning how to let go and trust differently. I'll see you in the next episode.